Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're taking a plunge into some really fascinating stuff today, basically a whole collection of research, and we're pulling out the bits that, really matter.
Yeah.
Think of this as your express lane to getting seriously in the know, and this time, it's all about you.
Exactly. We've been digging into some, well, really innovative ideas for how we design markets for essential things. Stuff like electricity and global communication, especially as the world is trying to get to net zero emissions.
Right.
So our goal today is really to make sense of the most exciting changes being proposed in these two, crucial areas.
And these aren't just like abstract theories floating around in academic papers, are they?
No, not at all.
We're looking at actual market designs that people are seriously considering, and in some cases, they're even being tested out, piloted.
That's right. So this is practical stuff. It has the potential to really impact how we live.
Okay.
And you see the challenge everywhere, don't you? Trying to balance what we need or demand with what's actually available.
Yeah, the supply side.
For electricity, it's the unpredictable nature of renewables like solar and wind. Plus, our demand is always growing, especially with more extreme weather patterns.
Right. Big swings.
And then for communications, it's just the sheer explosion in data use. It's bumping up against the limits of our current networks.
So these are big problems. They definitely need some new smart solutions.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's dive into electricity first then. A key idea that keeps coming up in the research is this concept of a forward energy market. Why is that becoming such a hot topic right now, given all the shifts in how we generate and use power?
Well, what's really interesting is how the big push towards electrification, think electric cars, electric heating, combined with the rise of renewables, it's really highlighting the weaknesses of just trying to balance the grid in real time.
Just moment by moment.
Exactly. When the sun isn't shining or maybe the wind isn't blowing, it's just much harder to keep the power flowing consistently, second by second. So a good forward market, it offers a pretty significant advantage in this new landscape.
How does it do that, though? What exactly does a forward market bring to the table, especially when we're talking about keeping the lights on with more, intermittent renewables?
Well, if we look at the bigger picture, a forward market essentially sends out price signals way in advance.
Okay, so early warnings.
Kind of. These signals act like a roadmap, telling people where investment needs to go, maybe building more renewables or developing better energy storage, or even just encouraging people to use less energy at peak times.
Right, shifting demand.
Yeah. Research, I think it was Cramton back in 2017, suggests that a clear and efficient forward market is really crucial for making the right investment and operational choices. The ones that ultimately benefit everyone, maximize social welfare.
So it's about getting a heads up on what's coming down the line and making sure the right things are in place. Got it. Now, the research we looked at suggests a pretty new way of designing this forward market, right? What are the main components of that design?
Yes, the proposed design has some really detailed elements. At its core, it involves trading two main things. First, forward contracts. Those are basically agreements to buy or sell electricity at a specific price and time in the future.
Standard forwards.
Right. And second, something called European call options. But, and this is key, with a relatively high price where they actually kick in the strike price, say around $1,000 per megawatt hour.
Wow, $1,000. That sounds really high. What's the thinking behind setting it, way up there?
Yeah, we can circle back to why that high price might be important, but the really innovative part here is just how specific, how granular these trading products are.
Granular? How so?
Well, you could trade a contract for electricity delivered during a particular year, in a specific month, during a certain hour, and even specify weekday or weekend. And you can do this up to 4 years ahead.
4 years, wow.
Yeah, imagine trading electricity specifically for, say, weekdays between 8 and 9 a.m. in August of 2018, that level of detail.
Okay, that's incredibly specific.
And they also suggest having daily products available for trading in the 30 days leading up to the actual delivery day with that same hourly granularity.
That's getting down to the absolute nitty-gritty. What's the advantage of having so much detail? Doesn't that just make it incredibly complicated to manage?
That's a fair question. It sounds complex, but the real benefit of these super specific products is that it allows the companies supplying electricity to us, the load-receiving entities, or LSEs.
Right, the LSEs.
It lets them really fine-tune how they manage their energy needs. They can lock in power for exactly when they expect their customers will use the most, a hot summer afternoon or a cold winter night.
Ah, I see. So it's like getting a perfectly tailored insurance policy.
Exactly. It covers precisely what you need, no more, no less. It lets them hedge their load profiles very closely.
Okay, that makes sense. Matching supply and demand really precisely over time. Now, one of the big hurdles for any market, especially a new one, is getting enough people trading, liquidity.
Yeah, liquidity is key.
How does this proposed design try to make sure there's enough activity, enough liquidity in the market?
This brings up a really important point. The researchers definitely acknowledge that current forward markets often, they don't have as much trading as they ideally should.
Right, they can be thin.
So, to tackle this, they propose something called mandatory purchase obligations for those LSEs we just mentioned.
Mandatory obligations, so forcing them to trade.
Kind of. The idea is that by requiring them to buy a certain amount of their expected power needs in advance, through this forward market, it creates a sort of baseline level of demand.
Okay.
And that, in turn, should encourage more trading activity overall and help establish more reliable price signals.
So it's like saying, look, you have to buy at least some of your power ahead of time using this market. Does that actually guarantee the market will be active and work well, though?
Well, the research actually points out a potential snag here. They use the electricity market in Australia as an example.
Oh, interesting. What happened there?
They have similar rules, these mandatory purchase requirements, but LSEs, particularly the smaller ones, have sometimes struggled to actually find other companies willing to sell them those forward contracts at, stable prices.
Ah, so the sellers weren't always there or the prices were volatile.
Exactly. So just forcing participation doesn't automatically guarantee smooth and efficient trading. It's not quite that simple.
Right, you can lead a horse to water.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to this idea of flow trading that keeps popping up in the research. What exactly is flow trading and how does it help with this problem of, trading so many different very specific products?
Flow trading is a really ingenious mechanism. It's designed specifically to make trading manageable, even in a market with a huge number of these very granular products.
Okay.
Instead of having these big, infrequent auctions like Big Bang events where everyone tries to buy and sell massive amounts all at once.
Which can cause huge price swings.
Yeah, exactly. And potentially give some big players too much market power. Flow trading, instead, allows for a much more gradual and continuous process.
Gradual and continuous.
Think of it like a steady stream of trading activity happening constantly, maybe hour by hour, rather than one big wave crashing down.
Okay, more like a river than a tidal wave. So it's a slow and steady approach.
That's a good analogy. In this proposed electricity market, what they're essentially trading are contracts based on the expected price of electricity in the day-ahead market.
Ah. So linked to the near real-time market.
Yes, but these forward contracts are aggregated up, usually to the level of regional load zones. This helps strike a balance, you get some location specificity, but you keep the total number of things being traded manageable.
Got it. And how do these forward prices actually behave under this flow trading system? The research mentioned they ran a simulation using the ERCOT market in Texas. What did that show? Did it work?
Yeah, the simulation results were pretty interesting. It showed that these monthly forward prices really did seem to reflect the fundamental forces of supply and demand in the Cologne market.
So they weren't just random numbers.
Not at all. You could clearly see the seasonal patterns. Prices tended to be lower in the milder shoulder seasons, spring and fall, and higher when demand is typically greater, like during hot Texas summers.
Makes sense.
And you also saw the daily cycles reflected in the prices. Higher prices during peak usage hours in the afternoon, lower prices overnight. There's a figure 1 in the paper that shows this visually.
Okay.
So the forward market seems to give a pretty clear indication of what prices are expected to be as you get closer to the actual time of delivery.
That makes intuitive sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Prices set in advance should give you a good idea of what to expect later on. Now, what about those daily products they mentioned? How do they connect the longer-term monthly contracts with what's happening, right before delivery?
Right. The daily products act as a kind of bridge, a stepping stone between those longer-term monthly contracts and the very immediate day-ahead market.
Okay.
These daily products start trading, I think, 30 days before the actual day the electricity will be used, and they still have that hour-by-hour level of detail.
Feel very granular.
Exactly. So as you get closer to the actual day, those broader monthly contracts essentially get refined, broken down into these more precise daily products, which then eventually link up directly with the specific amounts of electricity bought and sold in the day-ahead market for, immediate use.
Ah, so it creates a smooth transition.
Yes, it aims to create a very integrated and responsive system from years ahead right down to the day itself.
It sounds like a really well thought out system, the whole structure. Now let's get into the mechanics a bit more. This flow trading. How do the participants actually place their bids? And how does the market figure out the prices for potentially thousands of different products?
This is where it gets really fascinating, I think. In flow trading, instead of placing individual bids for every single specific product, like, electricity for 8 a.m. on Tuesday in July in this specific zone,
It should be impossible, right?
pretty much impossible to manage manually. Instead, traders submit orders for a portfolio of products, a bundle. And this order is expressed as what's called a piecewise linear net demand curve. Equation 1 in the research shows the math.
Okay, piecewise linear net demand curve. Let's break that down. What are the key things a trader defines when they submit this kind of order?
There are a few key elements. First, there are the portfolio weights. That basically says how much of each specific product, like July 8 a.m. versus August 9 a.m., is included in the overall bundle you want to trade, and whether you want to buy or sell that product within the bundle.
So the mix of products.
Right. Then there's the maximum flow rate, let's call it a key. That's the maximum amount of your chosen portfolio you're willing to trade in each auction period, maybe each hour.
Your maximum trading speed for that bundle.
Exactly. And finally, you set a lower price limit, apply, and an upper price limit, P high, for your entire portfolio, for the whole bundle.
Okay, so you're essentially saying, for this specific collection of energy products, I want to buy up to Q amount per hour, as long as the total calculated price for the whole bundle is somewhere between my lower limit ply and my upper limit P high.
That's the core idea, yes. If the calculated portfolio price is at or below your lower limit, you signal you want to buy at your maximum flow rate. If the portfolio price is above your upper limit, you signal you don't want to buy any, or sell if you're selling.
And in between.
And in between those two price points, the amount you want to trade changes linearly. It decreases smoothly from your max rate down to 0 as a price goes from your lower limit to your upper limit.
Okay.
Equation 2 in the research shows exactly how that portfolio price is calculated. It's based on the individual market prices of all the products in your bundle and the weights you've assigned to them.
Got it. So each participant submits these potentially complex demand curves for their chosen bundles of energy products.
Yeah.
How does the market then take all those different bids and figure out the single price for each individual product? The July 8 a.m. price versus the August 9 a.m. price.
Right, that's the magic of the clearing mechanism. The market's goal is to maximize what's called as-bid social welfare.
As-bid social welfare.
Think of it like this. The market tries to find the set of prices and traded quantities where the total combined benefit to everyone participating, based purely on the bids they submitted, their willingness to pay or sell, is as high as possible.
Maximizing the value based on what people bid.
Exactly. To get a bit more technical, we need to touch on the idea of dollar utility, which they call VINCI, and marginal utility. That's in equation 3. Marginal utility is basically how much extra value in dollars a trader gets from buying or selling one more unit of their specific portfolio.
Okay.
The market clearing process essentially finds the prices where the total amount everyone wants to buy across all portfolios perfectly equals the total amount everyone wants to sell, and it does this in a way that maximizes this overall as-bid value derived from all those marginal utilities.
That sounds like a seriously complex calculation, especially with potentially thousands, maybe millions of different products.
Yeah.
How do they even guarantee that a set of prices that balances everything out actually exists? Is that guaranteed?
That's where some key mathematical work comes in. There's a theorem, too, cited from research by Budish and others, that's really important here.
Okay.
It mathematically proves that under this flow trading system, with certain reasonable conditions on the bids, there will always be a set of prices that clears the market. A set of prices where supply equals demand for every single product simultaneously.
Ah. So the math works out.
It relies on framing it as what's called a concave primal optimization problem with linear constraints. Basically, it shows there's a well-behaved mathematical problem that guarantees a solution exists.
Okay, knowing a solution exists is definitely good. But what if there's more than one solution? Could there be, multiple different sets of prices that all perfectly balance the market? That seems like it could be confusing or lead to instability.
That's a really valid point. And the research acknowledges that possibility there might not always be a single unique set of market clearing prices.
So how do they handle that?
They introduce a tie-breaking rule. It's quite clever, actually. If there are multiple sets of prices that all result in the same optimal amounts being traded and the same total welfare, the market mechanism selects the specific set of prices that is mathematically closest in Euclidean distance, usually to the prices from the previous auction period.
Ah, so it anchors to the recent past.
Exactly. It helps to keep prices relatively stable and predictable from one hour to the next, avoiding unnecessary jumps if multiple solutions exist.
That seems like a sensible, practical way to handle potential ambiguities. Okay. Now, what's the actual step-by-step process? How does one of these hourly auctions actually unfold for the participants?
Okay, so every hour, there's a window where participants can submit their initial orders, those piecewise linear demand curves for their portfolios, or they can update orders they already have in the system.
So you can adjust your strategy?
Yes. And often during this bidding window, they can see indicative information like estimated clearing prices based on the current bids and what their potential trading positions might look like.
Provisional results?
Kind of. Then, at the end of the hour, the auction closes. The platform takes all the final submitted orders and runs that complex optimization calculation we talked about.
A clearing process.
Right. It calculates the final market clearing prices for every single individual electricity product for all the future time periods being traded, and it determines the exact quantities that each participant bought or sold of their portfolios.
Okay.
Settlements, the financial side, the exchange of money for the trades are also updated frequently, maybe hourly. And there's a crucial collateral management system running constantly.
Collateral, like a security deposit.
Exactly. It monitors the financial risk exposure of each participant based on their trades. If someone's trades create too much potential future liability compared to the collateral they've posted, they might be restricted from making further trades that would increase their risk. It minimizes the chance of defaults.
So it's a continuous cycle. Bidding, adjusting, clearing, settling, managing risk. Happening hour after hour. Now, you mentioned the ERCOT market simulation earlier, that Texas market.
Yeah.
What kind of detailed computer modeling did they actually have to do to test if this whole complex system might actually work there?
Yeah, modeling electricity prices, especially in a market as dynamic and frankly volatile as ERCOT, is definitely a complex undertaking. The work by Brandkamp and colleagues involved using some pretty sophisticated statistical techniques.
Like what?
For instance, they used something called an Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process, that's equation 14 in the research, to model how natural gas prices fluctuate over time.
Because gas prices are a big griever.
A huge driver for electricity prices in Texas, yeah. Then, to account for the predictable ups and downs in electricity demand, daily peaks, seasonal changes, they used a method called deseasonalization. Equations 15 through 18 cover that.
Deseasonalization. Sounds like taking out the regular beat to hear the underlying rhythm.
That's a great way to put it. You remove the regular, predictable patterns, the seasonality, the daily cycle to better see the underlying trends, and more importantly, the random variations or shocks.
Okay.
And then for the electricity prices themselves, they used what's called a regime switching model.
Regime switching.
Yeah, it's a way of recognizing that electricity prices can behave very differently depending on the grid conditions. Prices might follow one pattern under normal conditions, but then switch to a completely different, much more volatile pattern during, say, extreme weather events or when there are unexpected power plant outages. Periods of high stress.
So like a normal mode and a crisis mode for prices.
Essentially, yes. They modeled a normal regime and a spike regime, and the probability of switching between these regimes was linked to the level of that deseasonalized net load, basically. How much electricity was needed after accounting for wind and solar generation.
Ah, so high net load increases the chance of price spikes.
Exactly. And they used a massive amount of historical data from ERCOT itself and the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, to calibrate all these models. Hourly prices, demand, gas prices, even hourly production data from lots of individual wind and solar farms.
Wow, that's an incredible amount of data to feed into the models. What did they do with all that price modeling then? Were they just trying to predict future prices?
Not just predict, no. Based on this sophisticated model of how day-ahead prices behave, they built another model called a merit order model.
Merit order. That's about which power plants run first, right?
Precisely. This model simulates how different types of power plants would decide when to turn on and how much power to produce based on those simulated day-ahead prices and their own operating costs. And from that, they could estimate the resulting profits or losses for the power generators.
Okay.
Table 4 in the research gives an overview of the different plant types in ERCOT gas, coal, nuclear, renewables, how many there are, their capacities.
So they modeled the supply side too.
Yes, and to make the analysis even more realistic, they didn't just model generic plants. They created representative power generation companies and representative LSCs that were designed to mirror the actual market structure and concentration in ERCOT.
So virtual versions of the real players.
Exactly. On the demand side, they generally assume perfect competition, with the retail prices that you and I pay being closely tied to the average wholesale day-ahead price plus a standard retail margin.
Okay.
So they essentially built a complete dynamic virtual replica of the ERCOT electricity market to test how this new forward trading system might actually play out in a complex real-world environment.
So they built a whole virtual Texas power grid. That's impressive. Now, you mentioned earlier that high $1,000 per megawatt hour strike price for the call options. What difference does that specific number make? What if they had used a lower strike price, say, $200?
That's a good question, and Appendix C of the research actually explores this. Brandkamp and his colleagues simulated the market with a lower strike price, 200 millirechs as well.
And what did they find?
They found that using a lower strike price tends to encourage market participants to buy more of those options and fewer of the straightforward contracts.
Why is that?
Well, a lower strike price provides protection against more common, less extreme price increases. It's like buying insurance with a lower deductible. It covers more frequent, smaller events.
Okay.
However, they also observed that a lower strike price might create stronger incentives for participants to take on larger arbitrage positions, betting on small differences between the option price and the expected future price. And large arbitrage plays aren't always beneficial for overall market stability.
So the higher strike price focuses the options more on hedging truly big risks.
That seems to be the implication. The $1,000 strike price likely intends to make the options primarily a tool for insuring against really significant unexpected price spikes, those tail risk events, rather than just hedging the more typical day-to-day or week-to-week fluctuations.
Interesting trade-off. So bringing this electricity part together, what are the biggest advantages you see from this whole gradual flow-based trading system for both the forwards and the options?
I think the main innovation, as you highlighted, is really this concept of gradual, continuous trading across many, many products.
Yeah, the flow trading itself.
Right. The research strongly suggests that this approach leads to much smoother, more predictable movements in both the prices and the quantities being traded over time.
Why smoother?
Because it encourages participants to constantly be in the market, providing bids and offers, which creates liquidity even for very niche specific products. People aren't waiting for one big auction, they're adjusting positions continuously. The end result, hopefully, is more stable and more reliable price signals emerging from the forward market. And those reliable signals are absolutely crucial for guiding long-term planning, investment decisions, and operational choices in this complex energy transition.
More stable prices. Definitely something everyone involved in electricity, from generators to LSEs to end consumers, would appreciate. Now, thinking practically, if regulators or grid operators wanted to start moving towards a system like this, would they have to completely tear down the existing electricity markets and start totally from scratch? That sounds disruptive.
Not necessarily, no, and that's a key point the research makes. A more gradual step-by-step implementation seems quite possible.
An incremental approach.
Exactly. Regulatory bodies could potentially pilot this new forward energy market concept without needing to completely dismantle existing day-ahead or real-time market structures immediately.
How would that work?
They could start smaller. Perhaps initially just implement the forward market for a shorter time window, maybe only that 30-day period leading up to delivery, and maybe start with a more limited set of the most important products.
Test the waters first.
Right. Once the benefits, hopefully things like better price discovery, improved risk management for participants become clear and the system proves robust, then the market could be gradually expanded. Add more products, extend the trading horizon further out, maybe eventually reaching that full 4-year look ahead they propose.
Okay.
It's about proving the concept on a manageable scale first, building confidence, and then scaling up if it proves successful.
That sounds like a much more practical and, frankly, less politically risky way to introduce such a potentially significant change.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We've taken a pretty thorough look at the electricity market proposals. Let's switch gears now and talk about global communications. It seems there are some interesting parallels in the challenges they face and maybe some of the solutions being proposed.
Absolutely. There are definite parallels. In the world of communications, there's a concept often called the walled garden problem.
Walled garden.
Yeah, it refers to situations where markets are often dominated by just a few very large companies. Think major telecom providers or tech giants. This concentration can lead to limited competition, high prices, and make it really difficult for new, innovative players to enter the market and compete effectively.
Right. High barriers to entry.
Exactly. So the research we looked at proposes an open access market as a way to essentially dismantle those walls, to foster a more level playing field for providing communication services.
Okay.
They even draw an analogy to history, the breakup of the Bell system monopoly in the U.S. telephone industry back in the day. That's often cited as an example of how breaking up concentration can spur innovation and competition.
So the goal is to move away from these closed-off, concentrated markets where a few big players have most of the control towards something much more open and competitive.
That's precisely the idea. And what's really fascinating and ties back to our earlier discussion is that this proposed open access market for communications explicitly builds upon many of the same principles being developed for those wholesale electricity markets we just talked about.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, the core idea is to have both real-time markets for immediate communication capacity needs and also forward markets for securing capacity further into the future, just like in electricity.
Okay, real time and forward. And it sounds like this idea of flow trading is also a key part of this proposed communications market design.
Yes, absolutely central. Flow trading, drawing on that same Buddhist et al. Research, is the engine proposed for this market too. Participants would submit those persistent, piecewise, linear, downward-sloping net demand curves.
But for communication capacity, not electricity.
Exactly. They'd be bidding for portfolios of different types of communications capacity products, maybe different speeds, different locations, different quality levels.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea is to have a neutral, independent, wholesale network operator running the market. Their objective wouldn't be to maximize their own profit, but to maximize that as-bid social welfare we discussed, essentially, getting the available capacity allocated to the users who value it most at any given time, based purely on their submitted bids.
So very similar underlying principles. Flow trading, portfolio bidding, maximizing as-bid welfare, but applied to trading communication capacity instead of electrons. What are some of the specific ways this would work day to day in the communication sector?
The market would operate with frequent clearing, likely hourly, just like the electricity proposal. Every hour, the system would run the calculation and determine the unique clearing prices and the traded quantities for all the different types of communications capacity products being traded for various future periods.
And would that information be public?
Yes, a key feature is transparency. All of this market data, the prices that were set, the total volumes traded, maybe even aggregated information about the overall demand slope would be made publicly available, probably with some delay. And that independent market operator would also be responsible for tracking participants' trading positions and managing the collateral requirements, again, to minimize the risk of anyone defaulting on their commitment.
Right, managing counterparty risk. Now, the research focuses quite specifically on applying this whole concept to inter-satellite communications using lasers, optical links in space. Why that particular niche area of communication? It seems very futuristic.
It does sound futuristic, but it's happening now. This is a really interesting and timely application. These optical mesh networks in space, using laser beams to shoot data between satellites, offer some potentially significant advantages over traditional methods.
Such as?
Well, first, truly global connectivity reaching anywhere on Earth. Second, potentially lower latency for very long-distance communications. Light travels faster in the vacuum of space than through fiber optic cables buried underground or under the sea.
Faster than fiber for long hops.
For very long distances, yes, potentially. Third, they could allow for internet-independent routing. Data could potentially travel across the satellite network without ever touching the terrestrial internet, which could have implications for reliability and security.
Okay, those are big potential benefits.
But there's a big but. The amount of communication capacity, the bandwidth available on these satellite networks, at least currently and in the near future, is much more limited compared to the immense capacity of terrestrial fiber networks.
Right, space is hard, Satellites are expensive.
Exactly. And that limited capacity makes it absolutely critical to manage congestion efficiently. You need to make sure that scarce bandwidth gets allocated to where it's needed most.
Okay, so how does this open access flow trading approach help manage that limited capacity challenge in these satellite networks?
The open access model, with its dynamic pricing based on bids, is proposed as a more efficient way to handle that scarcity compared to traditional approaches.
What are the traditional approaches?
Often, network operators might just set prices significantly above their marginal cost to try and limit demand, or they might resort to rationing bandwidth during busy periods, or have complex negotiated contracts.
Okay.
The dynamic pricing that emerges from the open access market, driven by flow trading, ensures that the limited capacity automatically flows to the users who demonstrate through their bids that they value it the most at any given moment. It's seen as a more efficient, market-based way of dealing with congestion rather than administrative rationing or potentially inefficient static pricing.
And what's the incentive for the satellite companies themselves, the ones launching these constellations, to adopt this kind of open access market? Wouldn't they prefer to just control their own networks completely and set their own prices to maximize their own revenue?
That's the classic question, isn't it? The argument presented in the research is that by committing to and participating in a well-designed open access market, a satellite provider can actually maximize the overall value generated by their network, especially if there's strong competition on the buying side of the market, which there typically is for communication services.
How does open access maximize value?
By attracting the widest possible range of users and enabling the capacity to flow to its highest value use at any given time. The key is delegating the actual day-to-day operation of the network capacity market to an independent, neutral operator.
Ah, the independent operator again.
Yes, with clear governance rules in place that guarantee open, non-discriminatory access for everyone who meets the criteria. This builds trust among potential users, buyers, and sellers, and encourages broad participation.
So it's like building trust is key to getting maximum participation.
Exactly. Think about financial markets. People trust trading on major stock exchanges because they are perceived as neutral platforms with clear rules. That neutrality fosters liquidity and efficiency, benefiting all participants, including the companies whose shares are traded. The idea is similar here for satellite capacity.
That makes sense. A neutral platform can foster more trust, leading to more participation, and potentially a more valuable network overall. Now, the research makes a point of distinguishing market design from other related fields like mechanism design or industrial organization theory. What's the key difference in their approach as you see it?
That's a really important distinction they make. While mechanism design often focuses on finding theoretically perfect solutions under idealized assumptions, like assuming everyone is perfectly rational and has perfect information.
Which isn't reality.
Right. And industrial organization theory often analyzes existing market structures and behaviors. Market design, as presented here, is much more pragmatic. It's focused on implementation.
Practicality first.
Yes. It's about defining clear, simple, workable market rules. Establishing the specific ways participants can interact, like the bidding language, and creating systems and incentives that encourage participants to behave efficiently and truthfully in practice, even acknowledging that they might not be perfectly rational or might have strategic incentives. The ultimate goal is to create something that can actually be built and will lead to demonstrably better outcomes in the real world, not just on paper.
So, less about achieving some abstract theoretical perfection and more about building markets that are functional, robust, efficient, and actually serve their intended purpose in the messy real world.
That's a very good summary of the market design philosophy, I think.
Okay. Now let's talk about the actual players in this emerging satellite communications arena. The research mentioned 3 key names: Amazon's Project Kuiper, SpaceX's Starlink, and a company called Rivada Space Networks. What are the main differences between their proposed networks and business models?
They represent somewhat different strategies and visions for satellite communication. Starlink and Amazon's Kuiper are primarily positioning themselves as global internet service providers, or ISPs.
Connecting end users directly.
Exactly. Their main goal is to connect end user terminals on the ground, homes, businesses, vehicles directly to internet gateways, also often on the ground. Their use of intersatellite laser links is largely seen as a way to extend their service coverage, reduce reliance on numerous ground stations, and maybe improve latency slightly.
Okay, so augmenting the internet.
Yes. Rivada, on the other hand, is explicitly aiming for something different. They envision their network as more of a true independent meshed data backbone in space, almost like an outer net, as they sometimes call it.
Outer net.
Yeah, the idea is to route data traffic dynamically across their satellite constellation, potentially from one end user location directly to another, perhaps without needing to touch the terrestrial internet infrastructure at all for the main transport leg.
So Starlink and Amazon are more like extending the existing internet up into low Earth orbit, while Rivada is trying to create a parallel, potentially independent data network entirely in space.
That's a reasonable way to characterize the difference in their core architecture and ambition based on the descriptions.
And does this difference influence who they're targeting?
It seems so. Amazon and Starlink, aiming to be ISPs, are largely focused on serving potentially millions or even billions of individual consumers and small businesses. This requires massive network capacity and therefore very large constellations with thousands or even tens of thousands of satellites.
Okay.
Rivada appears to be leaning more towards government and large enterprise clients, offering secure, resilient, high-bandwidth connectivity. This might require fewer satellites overall, perhaps in the hundreds, but potentially with more sophisticated inter-satellite linking and onboard processing capabilities. They also operate at different proposed altitudes, which impacts things like signal latency and the number of satellites needed for global coverage.
Right. And we should remember, as you said, that for many use cases, especially in densely populated areas or for shorter distances, terrestrial fiber optic cables are still king in terms of sheer data capacity, right?
Absolutely. Satellite isn't going to replace fiber everywhere or for every need. Fiber offers vastly more bandwidth density where it's deployed, but these orbital mesh networks offer unique advantages in other areas.
Okay, so what are some of those unique benefits, even considering their capacity limitations compared to fiber?
Well, redundancy is a huge one. If terrestrial communication networks go down, maybe due to natural disasters, fiber cuts, or even cyber attacks, these satellite networks could provide a critical backup path for essential communications. Exactly. Then there's the latency advantage for very long-distance communication that we touched on. For applications that are highly sensitive to delays, like high-frequency financial trading between, say, London and Tokyo, shaving off milliseconds by going through space instead of winding undersea cables can be incredibly valuable. There are tables in the research, tables 1 through 5, that illustrate these potential time savings between major financial centers.
Okay, latency for specific routes.
Then there's the ability to provide truly global coverage, reaching remote areas, ships at sea, aircraft in flight places currently underserved or unserved by terrestrial infrastructure, and potentially enhance cybersecurity and data sovereignty if data can be kept within the space-based network for sensitive applications.
Right, but the capacity is still limited.
Yes, and that's why managing that capacity is key, using optimized routing algorithms and, importantly, dynamic pricing as Rivada plans with its open access model becomes essential for handling congestion effectively. This seems different from the more static, tiered pricing models we've seen initially from players like Starlink.
So dynamic pricing becomes even more crucial when you have that inherent capacity constraint in space. Now, thinking about the fundamental economics, how do these satellite networks compare to something like laying down vast terrestrial fiber optic networks?
The underlying economics are quite different. Laying fiber, especially undersea or long-distance terrestrial routes, involves massive upfront civil engineering costs, digging trenches, securing rights of way. This creates significant economies of scale and often leads to situations of natural monopoly or oligopoly. Once a fiber line is in place, it's often prohibitively expensive for a competitor to build a completely parallel, redundant line right next to it.
High fixed cost, natural barriers to entry.
Exactly. Satellite networks, while still requiring very significant investment in R&D, satellite manufacturing, and launch services, don't have quite the same overwhelming economies of scale and deployment. Building a satellite network with twice the capacity might roughly cost twice as much, maybe a bit less due to manufacturing improvements, but not exponentially less like adding capacity to an existing fiber route might be.
More linear scaling.
Sort of. This implies that the first company to launch a large satellite constellation, like Starlink, doesn't necessarily create an insurmountable barrier preventing others from entering the market, unlike perhaps the company that first laid fiber across the Atlantic. Plus, we're seeing rapidly declining launch costs, thanks to reusable rockets and big advances in mass manufacturing satellites, which is making these space-based networks increasingly economically viable.
Okay.
Combine that changing supply-side picture with the ever-growing and highly variable demand for communication services, demand that fluctuates significantly by time of day and geographic location, and you see why dynamic pricing becomes not just beneficial, but almost essential for efficiently balancing supply and demand in these constrained networks. It really represents a fundamental shift away from traditional models of selling long-term fixed connectivity contracts towards a world of dynamically priced on-demand capacity.
That does sound like a potentially major paradigm shift in how we access and pay for global communication infrastructure. Now, drilling down into this specific proposed open access market for global communications, what are the main goals and claimed advantages, as outlined in the research?
The research explicitly highlights 4 principal objectives for this market design. First, efficiency, using dynamic pricing to ensure the limited network resources are allocated to their highest value uses. Second, simplicity, making it straightforward for diverse participants to engage in the market through transparent rules and bidding processes.
Okay, efficiency, simplicity.
Third, coverage, enabling supply to meet demand effectively wherever and whenever it arises across the globe. And fourth, competition, fostering a more competitive landscape by lowering the barriers for new service providers and users to access the underlying network capacity.
Efficiency, simplicity, coverage, competition. And what are the key benefits that supposedly flow from achieving those objectives?
They list several key benefits. Things like non-discriminatory access, everyone gets to play by the same rules. Granularity, the ability to buy and sell capacity very specifically in terms of time, location, and quality. The use of flow trading, which allows participants to express complex preferences efficiently. A level playing field created by transparency in pricing and trading activity. A more democratized governance structure for the market itself, and optimized management of collateral to reduce the friction and cost of trading.
Democratized governance. That sounds intriguing, especially for a commercial network. Who are the different players envisioned in this market ecosystem, and how would this governance actually work?
It's quite a comprehensive structure they propose. You have, of course, the network supplier, that's the satellite operator who owns and operates the physical constellation, like Rivada. And then you have sellers of capacity. This could be the supplier itself, or large wholesale customers who buy capacity in bulk and then resell portions of it. You also have buyers. These could be governments, large corporations, mobile network operators, cloud providers, other communication service providers.
Okay, supplier, sellers, buyers.
Then, crucially, you have the independent market operator, IMO. This entity is responsible for the day-to-day running of the trading platform, clearing the market, managing settlement.
A neutral referee.
Exactly. And supporting the IMO, they propose a decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO. This would likely use blockchain technology to provide a transparent, auditable, and potentially community-driven way to oversee and evolve the market rules over time.
A DAO for governance. Interesting.
And alongside that, there would likely be an independent market monitor, IMM, whose job is to continuously scrutinize the market's performance, look for potential manipulation or inefficiencies, and recommend improvements to the operator and the DAO.
Okay, checks and balances. How do the governance tokens fit in?
The governance tokens are proposed as the mechanism for that democratized governance. These would be digital tokens, perhaps issued initially by the network supplier or the market operator. Market participants, buyers, and sellers could acquire these tokens. Holding these tokens would grant them rights. First, voting rights on key decisions regarding the market's rules, protocols, or future development, potentially managed through the DAO structure. Second, potentially economic rights, perhaps giving token holders a share in the market's transaction fees or other revenue streams.
So the users of the network, the participants in the market, actually get a say and potentially an economic stake in how it's managed and evolved. That's quite different. Now, you mentioned earlier that forward trading would also play a significant role in this communications market, just like in electricity. How would that be beneficial here?
The benefits are quite parallel to the electricity case, actually. Forward trading allows users of communication capacity to reduce their cost uncertainty. They can lock in capacity at a known price in advance, protecting themselves from potentially volatile prices in the real-time market later on.
Hedging price risk.
Exactly. It also helps them ensure they actually secure the capacity they anticipate needing, as uncertainty about their future demand decreases over time as they get closer to the delivery period. They can adjust their forward positions accordingly.
Aligning purchases with needs.
Right. And perhaps most importantly, from a system perspective, The activity in the forward market, the prices being discovered for capacity months or even years ahead, provides invaluable information. It signals future supply and demand conditions.
Signals for investment.
Precisely. These signals can guide crucial decisions about when and where to invest in network upgrades, deploy new satellites, enhance ground infrastructure, or improve overall network resilience. It helps align long-term investment with expected future needs.
Right, and these are financial contracts.
Yes, typically these forward products would be financially settled, meaning if you buy forward capacity but don't actually use it all or use more than you bought, the difference is settled with cash based on the eventual real-time market price. Collateral is managed throughout the process, as we discussed, to minimize the risk of default. They even mention the potential to use blockchain-based smart contracts to automate parts of the settlement process, making it potentially faster and more transparent.
So forward trading isn't just about physically securing capacity. It's also a crucial tool for financial risk management and providing signals for future network development. Makes sense. What about the day-to-day operation of the market itself? Who can participate and what exactly are they trading?
Participation in the market is envisioned as being voluntary. Anyone who meets the financial and technical criteria could potentially join. The main things being traded would be capacity tokens, likely measured in gigabytes or similar units of data transfer, and those governance tokens we discussed.
Capacity tokens and governance tokens. Are the capacity tokens all the same?
No, they propose differentiating them into tiers based on quality of service. For instance, they mention 3 potential tiers: premium, regular, and fast.
Premium, regular, fast. What's the difference?
They'd be differentiated by the level of real-time routing optimization they receive from the network. Premium capacity would get the highest priority, the most sophisticated routing to ensure low latency and high reliability, maybe guaranteed bandwidth. Regular capacity would still be prioritized, but might be subject to some throttling or slightly less optimal routing if the network gets very congested. And fast capacity might be routed purely based on the absolute quickest path available at that moment, even if that path is slightly less reliable or takes more network resources overall.
Different service levels for different needs and willingness to pay.
Okay.
And location.
To handle location, they propose dividing the globe into a grid of regions. The paper suggests maybe around 500 distinct geographic regions for defining the source and destination points of the capacity being traded.
500 regions, wow.
So a specific product might be premium capacity token from region A to region B during hour X on day Y. You can see how the number of potential products explodes.
Millions easily.
Right. And that's where flow trading comes in again. It happens through those frequent, maybe hourly auctions. Participants submit their piecewise linear decreasing demand curves for portfolios of these different capacity tokens. Premium, regular, fast, different region pairs, different times.
Bundles again.
Exactly. The market clearing process finds the prices that maximize that as-bid social welfare across all participants and all products simultaneously. Settlement and collateral management follow the principles we discussed: frequent updates, risk monitoring, and a key aspect throughout is transparency. Market prices, aggregate volumes, maybe even anonymized participant positions being publicly posted to inform everyone.
Millions of potential products. It still sounds incredibly complex to trade, even with portfolios.
Yeah.
But flow trading is supposed to make this manageable, right? How does it really handle that level of, well, dimensionality?
That's really the core strength claim for flow trading. It's specifically designed to function efficiently in these kinds of high-dimensional trading environments with potentially millions of interrelated products.
Oh.
Participants don't have to actively track and place bids for every single one of those millions of products individually. Instead, by submitting those persistent portfolio orders, those demand curves for bundles, they create a continuous pressure, a flow of potential trading across all the related products within their portfolios.
Okay.
And strategies like trade to target make it much easier for participants to manage their overall positions without micromanaging every single product.
Trade to target. What's that?
The idea is a participant can define a target quantity they want to hold for a particular portfolio of products, say secure X amount of transatlantic capacity for next quarter. They also define a rate at which they want to adjust their current holdings towards that target, and crucially, this rate of adjustment can depend on the current market price for that portfolio.
So buy faster if it's cheap, slower if it's expensive.
Exactly. It allows them to automate their trading strategy to a large extent, letting the flow trading mechanism execute their desired adjustments based on the price signals emerging from the market. It simplifies navigating that complexity. And these forward products using these strategies could cover time horizons extending out quite far, maybe up to 5 years ahead.
Trade to target. Now that does sound like a much more intuitive and manageable way to navigate such a potentially overwhelming market. Now, you mentioned the mathematical foundations of flow trading earlier, based on optimization. Can you just briefly touch on that again? What makes it work?
Sure. At its heart, flow trading relies on well-established mathematical principles from convex optimization, as detailed in that Buddhist et al. Work.
Right.
It involves formulating the market clearing problem as finding the solution to interconnected optimization problems, often referred to as a primal problem, maximizing welfare, and a dual problem, finding prices.
Primal and dual.
Okay. These mathematical structures, under the assumptions of the model, like the piecewise linear bids, guarantee the existence of market clearing prices and quantities. And they also help ensure that, especially when combined with that tie-breaking rule of choosing prices closest to the previous auction's prices, you get a unique, stable outcome.
And computationally.
They use advanced computational techniques to actually solve these large-scale optimization problems very quickly. The paper mentions using methods like the alternating direction method of multipliers, or ADMM. These algorithms are designed to be highly efficient, even with a huge number of variables, products, and constraints. Bids. That's what makes clearing the market frequently, like hourly, feasible.
So there's some serious computational horsepower and clever math behind the scenes, making this all work smoothly. And it seems they've even gone beyond theory and actually developed a prototype platform to test these ideas in practice.
Yes, that's right. The research mentions a working prototype platform that has been built. It's designed to demonstrate how these forward market and flow trading principles could be implemented across various sectors, not just electricity and communications, but potentially transportation or other areas too.
What does the prototype do?
It apparently includes modules like a forward market system for managing trading accounts, positions, and constructing those portfolio bids, and a lower level flow trading system that handles the heavy lifting, running the optimization algorithms to clear the market based on the submitted bids.
Yeah.
The key point they emphasize is that the architecture is specifically designed to scale. It can handle a very large number of distinct products due to the efficiency of convex optimization and the flow trading approach, making frequent clearing computationally feasible.
It's really impressive that they're not just writing academic papers about these ideas, but actually building and testing the software tools to see if they can work in reality. Now, bringing it back specifically to the communications sector, how does using flow trading within this proposed open access market structure help address some of those key practical concerns like, well, ensuring enough trading activity, liquidity?
Flow trading helps promote liquidity in a few ways. First, by allowing trading in portfolios, it facilitates what's called near-perfect substitution between products that are very similar but not identical. For example, premium capacity for 9 a.m. might be a very close substitute for premium capacity at 10 a.m., or capacity between adjacent geographic regions. Flow trading makes it easy to express these substitution preferences.
Okay, makes related products liquid.
Second, the continuous nature, the ability for participants to make gradual adjustments to their portfolios hour by hour rather than waiting for infrequent large auctions, naturally contributes to a more consistently active and liquid market.
What about managing the risk of defaults counterparty risk?
The transparency of the market, seeing prices and aggregate flows combined with the efficiency of forward trading itself, helps here. It encourages participants to maintain more balanced positions overall, hedging their risks gradually, rather than taking on very large, speculative, one-sided risks that could lead to defaults if prices move unexpectedly.
So less chance of big blowups.
That's the hope. They draw parallels to preventing the kind of market crises seen in some energy markets, where lack of transparency and poor forward hedging led to major defaults. The efficient price discovery and collateral management in flow trading are designed to mitigate this risk.
And encouraging flexibility and competition.
Efficient prices that accurately reflect the real-time value and scarcity of network capacity inherently reward flexibility. Users who can shift their demand away from peak times or utilize lower tiers of service when appropriate are rewarded with lower costs. This incentivizes innovation on the demand side, developing applications that are more network aware. And fundamentally, as we discussed, the entire open access structure, enabled by flow trading managing the complexity, is inherently pro-competitive. It aims to lower the barriers for new companies, new service providers, application developers to enter the market and access the essential underlying communication infrastructure on a level playing field.
Lower barriers to entry would definitely be a welcome change in many parts of the communication world. The research even provides some simplified examples of how flow trading might work with different types of participants, buyers, sellers, arbitrageurs. Can you maybe give us a quick flavor of one of those examples?
Sure. They provide some nice illustrations. Imagine just three hypothetical participants. Anne, who is an arbitrager just looking to profit from tiny temporary price discrepancies. Sally, who's a seller, maybe a satellite operator with some spare capacity she wants to monetize. And David, who's a buyer, maybe a company that needs capacity to deliver streaming video to its customers.
Okay, Anne, Sally, and David.
Even with just a single, simple, forward product, let's say, premium network capacity for tomorrow between London and New York, each of them submits their net demand curve. Anne might offer to buy if the price is slightly below her estimate of its true value, and sell if it's slightly above. Sally submits a curve showing she's willing to sell more capacity as the price goes up. David submits a curve showing he wants to buy more capacity as the price goes down.
Standard supply and demand curves, basically.
Expressed in that piecewise linear format, yes. The market mechanism then aggregates these curves. It finds the single equilibrium price point where the total amount Anne, Sally, and David want to buy exactly matches the total amount they collectively want to sell.
Where supply meets demand.
Exactly. They then extend this example slightly to include two different products simultaneously, say, both regular and premium capacity for that same route tomorrow. Now, Anne, Sally, and David can submit bids for portfolios. Maybe David wants mostly regular, but is willing to substitute some premium if it's cheap enough. Sally might only have premium to sell. Anne might try to arbitrage the price difference between regular and premium.
More complex interactions.
Right. And the flow trading mechanism simultaneously determines the clearing prices for both regular and premium capacity, ensuring both markets clear based on all the interconnected bids and portfolio preferences submitted by the participants. These simplified examples really help to visualize how, even with diverse needs and trading strategies, the flow trading mechanism can efficiently coordinate activity and find equilibrium prices across multiple related products.
Those examples definitely help make these abstract concepts much more concrete and understandable. Okay, so we've covered a huge amount of ground today, from these really innovative market design ideas for electricity, dealing with renewables and complexity, all the way to the potential for open access and flow trading to fundamentally reshape global communications, especially in space. Looking back over everything, what are the key things that really stand out to you after this deep dive?
For me, the overarching insight is just the really significant transformative potential of these core ideas, open access, granular products, flow trading. Applying them to essential infrastructure sectors feels like it could be a game changer as we navigate this transition towards a more sustainable, more data-intensive future.
So, powerful toolkit.
Yes. Whether it's managing the inherent complexities and intermittency of modern electricity grids with lots of renewables, or efficiently allocating the scarce bandwidth in burgeoning global communication networks, these new market designs seem to offer a coherent and potentially much more effective pathway. A pathway towards systems that are more efficient, definitely more transparent, and ultimately, hopefully, more resilient and adaptable.
And for our listener, for you listening right now, what's the most important thing to take away from all this complex discussion? Why should you care about forward markets and flow trading?
Well, what's really important for you to see, I think, is how these seemingly technical market design changes could have real-world impacts. More efficient and transparent markets can lead to a better, smarter use of vital resources, whether that's electricity or bandwidth. That can, in turn, reduce the risks we all face, risks of unexpected price spikes, service disruptions, or capacity shortages. And potentially, just maybe, it could even lead to lower costs for you in the long run, whether that's reflected in your monthly electricity bill or the cost of your internet or phone plan, or the price of goods and services that rely on these infrastructures.
That's definitely something that has the potential to benefit everyone, not just the big players. So as we start to wrap things up, here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe ponder. We've taken a really close look today at electricity and communications, two absolutely vital sectors. But what about other essential services, other critical resources that are facing similar challenges of growing complexity, increasing demand, and constrained or variable supply?
Where else could this apply?
Could these same market design principles, things like open access, trading in very specific granular products, using continuous flow trading to manage complexity, could they be applied to other domains we think of as essential commodities? Maybe things like water rights in drought-prone regions, or access to congested transportation networks like road usage or airport slots, or even trading access to critical minerals needed for the energy transition. It's definitely something worth thinking about. Where else could these powerful ideas make a difference?
That's a great question to leave people with. And we really encourage you, if this has piqued your interest, to explore the research papers we've drawn from today, especially the work on flow trading by Budish and others. There are many more layers of technical and economic detail, many nuances we couldn't cover.
Absolutely. Dive deeper if you can.
And as always, we welcome your thoughts and questions. We hope you'll continue to explore these fascinating and, frankly, really important developments that could shape our infrastructure for decades to come.